Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches, Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness.
I'm a mom to a very special little girl who recovered using the no plant GAPS diet from a rare terminal genetic disease. And we had no idea. We thought we were feeding her healthy by giving her lean meat and fruit and vegetables, but we were actually doing a lot of harm. She just had like endless amounts of energy now, like a normal 2.5-year-old. We couldn't believe it. She is completely crazy. Her and her 3-year-old brother just run around the house all day long playing. And she had to have 4 emergency surgeries from a volvulus because she ate a couple of crackers. I know quite a few kids who haven't made it to 5, unfortunately. So we're very lucky that she's here and that she's doing so well. But looking at her and how healthy she is, I think if we can really keep her on the diet, keep her understanding what works for her body and not have any exposure to other types of foods, I don't see a limit for her life expectancy.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today we have with us Jessica, who apparently will be sharing a testimonial success story, something along those lines. So Jessica, welcome. Thanks for doing this. Maybe we can start out with just telling us a little bit about yourself, who are you, and how'd you grow up and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Jessica Roman, and I am currently a health coach, and I'm finishing up a certification with the GAPS training. So I'm getting trained to be a GAPS coach as well. And I also am the founder of Christian Health Collective, which is a Christian health coaching platform. And I'm a mom to a very special little girl who recovered using the no plant GAPS diet, which is a segment of carnivore, from a rare terminal genetic disease.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Well, you have to tell us about that for sure.
Yeah, so she was born with MMIHS, or an ACTG2 genetic mutation. So that affects the intestine, small intestine, large intestine, and the bladder. And it makes for like slow intestinal motility. The intestines are malformed. Food moves very slowly through, and it also causes the bladder not to contract properly. So lots of medical interventions from the start. And then there's also like a spectrum of phenotypes, and hers is on the more severe end at 257. So high risk of mortality, high risk of transplant. A lot of these kids get bowel transplants, and that's how they end up surviving for a little bit longer. So when she was born, everything was going great. And then when we started solids and she stopped breastfeeding, that's when everything went haywire for us. So her intestines just could not process the standard American diet. Surprise, surprise.
So was this when she was diagnosed, or was she diagnosed earlier? When did you figure this out?
She was diagnosed at birth.
Yeah.
After about 3 days, they realized that she hadn't had a wet diaper yet after birth. So they took her in for an x-ray, and her bladder was hugely distended and she had to be catheterized, and they weren't sure what else was going on. And then I said, let's bring in a geneticist, and he had seen it before. So he tested her one time and got our diagnosis.
Okay. I have to admit, I've never heard of this diagnosis. You said it's a rare genetic, and there's lots of them, so that's not surprising. Yeah. How many, did you know how rare is this condition? How many people does it affect in the world?
I believe it's about 200 people worldwide.
Okay, so that's pretty rare. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness.
And we've talked to a lot of the families and like connected with them. So we actually know quite a bit of them.
Yeah, I guess there's only 200. And you said a lot of those kiddos end up with bowel transplants. That's what you're saying, to prolong their life expectancy. So yeah. How old is your daughter now?
She's 5.
She's 5. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you get the diagnosis at birth. She did okay with breastfeeding, but as soon as you switched over to solid food, what happened? What were the problems?
So she started to lose weight. Her stomach became very distended, lots of gas. She was unable to poop like really at all without any intervention. And she was vomiting. And then she started vomiting like green bile. So then she started having what was called pseudo obstructions. So the intestine acts like it has a physical obstruction, but it actually doesn't. And that was from the amount of gas that she had and the weakness of the intestines. So she wasn't able to push the food through and the gas that was coming with it. And that was due to fermentation happening in her bowel when she would eat foods that were fermentable. And we had no idea. We thought we were feeding her healthy by giving her lean meat and fruit and vegetables, but we were actually doing a lot of harm.
Was there a recommended diet for her? Again, this is such a rare condition. I don't think there's probably a lot of did the doctor say, hey, feed her this way or that way, or how did that go?
So we really pushed hard and tried to ask them if there was something that we could do for her dietary wise, because she did so well on breast milk. Why would she decline so quickly? So they said we should not restrict her diet and we should let her eat whatever she wants because we could cause her to have an eating disorder. And the recommendation was to put her on antibiotics 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for life to control the gas. That's what we got. Yeah.
That's an interesting approach. I'm not sure I understand that. But so I guess you opted not to do that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was very much against any pharmaceutical interventions. I really didn't want her to have surgery, but she ended up having quite a few. She ended up with an ileostomy and multiple revisions, and she ended up completely TPN dependent. So she was 100% dependent on IV nutrition, still had a huge distended belly, still was having pseudo obstructions, and she was diagnosed with intestinal failure.
Okay. Gosh, that's got to be devastating. So obviously she survived that and she's still a little 5-year-old girl. How did things change?
So we were obviously fighting for her life. She had 11 surgeries. She was constantly having ostomy revisions, constantly just living in the hospital. We were never really going home. And when we were, she was on TPN around the clock. We were managing a central line and ostomy. It was just chaos. So I had a friend who was very interested in like candida overgrowth. And I was like, I have a feeling there might be a connection here. So I started Googling candida overgrowth, and I came across a GAPS practitioner. Her name was Dr. Becky Plotner. And the first appointment I had with her, she was like, your daughter needs no plant GAPS, which is essentially carnivore, but with like broth and organ meat and fermented dairy added in as well. Mm-hmm. So we started her on that right away, and immediately we started to see good changes in her. She gained weight very quickly. She was very pale and had no hair, and her belly was distended, and she was like 26 pounds at almost 3 years old. Wow. And she gained 10 pounds in 2 months, and her hair was growing, and she just became so vibrant. She had no energy before, and very quickly she recovered.
So the diet prior to this sort of carnivore GAPS or no plant GAPS was what? Because you guys weren't feeding her junk food. What were you feeding her before while she was still really not doing well?
The only things that we had found that she could tolerate were meat and rice. So that's all we could really feed her without having a pseudo obstruction. And then she was completely supported by the TPN. Obviously, she was very malnourished because TPN is garbage, but that was all she could eat. So she would eat steak all day and a bowl of rice with butter.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar with the term TPM, total parenteral nutrition, so they basically you feed through the IVs, and so they have these various mixtures, which, as you mentioned, are not really potentially the best thing you could potentially consume. So you start on this, she starts gaining weight, her hair starts growing back. How did you guys have been excited about that? I'm sure, right?
Yeah, we were over the moon. We couldn't believe. We had been through so much. We've been through all of these surgeries, and she was just declining so quickly. She was such a little fragile girl, and she was to the point where she wouldn't really get up off the couch, and she didn't play much. She would never smile. We'd have to really try hard to interact with her or get her to do anything. And once we started this and we saw her playing and we started taking her to dance class and to the park, she just had like endless amounts of energy now, like a normal 2.5-year-old. And we couldn't believe it.
So, and now it's 2.5 years later. So this is, you guys have been doing it a couple of years now. So what is her like? What is she like today?
She is the most vibrant and fun kid. She is completely crazy. Her and her 3-year-old brother just run around the house all day long playing, and they're outside constantly climbing. She's very strong physically. She's very tall for her age, especially.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. She probably was, because you said she was 20 some pounds at 2.5 years old, 3 or whatever it was.
Yeah, she grew very quickly, and she's very tall, very tall, and her weight is perfect. Everything, she's in perfect health.
What does she eat now these days?
So she eats meat, organ meat, eggs, butter, kefir, which we make at home, yogurt that we make at home, and cheese. So she can tolerate some dairy now, and she can drink like raw milk, those kind of things, which she couldn't do that before.
Okay. And does she still have an ostomy, or what is her bowel situation like?
Yeah, she still has an ileostomy. I think we'll probably attempt to close it one day. It's never been done before in one of these kids. But she does have a lot of scar tissue left over from all of her surgeries.
Okay.
So we're trying to...
But her colon is still in place, and they could hook her back up if possible, right?
Yeah. Thank God.
Interesting. Wow, that's so amazing. But again, obviously this is a rare condition. So you said you know a lot of other parents of children with this condition. Have any of those other kiddos adopted anything similar?
Yeah, so there's a little girl in Chile who has been doing... We connected, and I told her parents about it. They reached out to Becky Plotner too, and they got on No Plant Gaps with their daughter. She's doing fantastic. She's taking a little bit longer to recover than my daughter did, but she had been on more pharmaceuticals, so we think that might be why, but she's come down on TPN. Hopefully she'll be completely off soon. And then there's a couple other kids around the US who their families have reached out to me, and I've started to help them out, and another little girl in Italy. So everyone's looking pretty good and improving.
Yeah, you said given there's maybe only a few hundred people in the world with this condition, that's amazing. So what has been the reception? Because I'm sure she has a pediatrician and a pediatric GI surgeon and all these people involved, and all these the TPN people. What has their response been to her recovery?
They're shocked, to say the least. Her doctor has been sharing her story at conferences internationally and talking about the No Plant Gaps diet as a potential intervention for kids with motility disorders, especially. So I would say it's a pretty positive reception, but they're not fully on board yet.
Yeah, and I get you mentioned motility, so I think there's a larger this is a subset of a general population of kids with motility disorders, and this is one specific genetic variation, it sounds like a fairly severe one. It could have more broad applicability across a wide spectrum of kids with gut motility disorders. Is that fair to say, you think?
Absolutely. I think every kid who has a motility disorder should be on the No Plant Gaps diet. And really what it comes down to is their slow motility is causing such an overgrowth of candida anytime you put any type of carbs into their body. And these kids love carbs because they have that candida overgrowth. They crave it even more than other kids. And that distension doesn't allow them to absorb nutrients the way that they should and get enough food in to, sorry about that, and get enough food in to like nourish their bodies. So they have to be on TPN. A lot of kids with motility disorders, right? So I think they should all adopt this diet. And it is hard. And I think one of the things that's preventing doctors from recommending it is obviously it takes a lot of work on the end of the parents to control a kid's diet this much. But if you do it as a family, you can really it can have such a great effect for your child and save their life at the end of the day.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker. Revolutionize your health with Revero. Struggling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, or autoimmune conditions? Revero offers a revolutionary approach to treating chronic diseases. With personal low-carb nutrition plans, remote biomarker monitoring, and 24/7 access to expert medical providers and coaches, Revero helps you address the root cause of your health concerns. Be part of the future of healthcare. Join the waitlist today at Revero.com and take the first step towards lasting wellness. Yeah, certainly it's worth it when it comes to those terms. So you said in order to make it easier on your daughter, the family, is it fair the family mostly eating this way now? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, we have been pretty much since we got her onto the diet, because when she was really little and she didn't understand, it was too dangerous to have other foods in the house, because if she got a hold of something, and she did once, she got a hold of some crackers that were left out and she ended up having a volvulus. And she had to have 4 emergency surgeries from a volvulus because she ate a couple of crackers. That's the severity of it. So yeah, we've been eating this way as well. Some of us do more keto. Like my 3-year-old is more keto. He has some fruit here and there. But for the most part, we eat this way, and it's kept us all very healthy.
Yeah, for those who aren't familiar with the term volvulus, basically the intestine twists on itself and it can actually basically strangle itself to where the blood supply gets cut off and the intestine can die. It's a very, very life-threatening issue. So your kiddo, she's 5. I don't know what the school situation may or may not be, if you're going to homeschool, if you're going to send her to school, but do you have thoughts on, like, if she goes to school, how would this work out? Because knowing that her dietary requirements are so sort of restrictive, and most schools are not in favor of animal-based diets. It's crazy. They're mostly in favor of sugar-based diets, it seems, silly enough.
Yeah, so we do homeschool. We did try sending her to school, and we would just send her with the same stuff she's eating at home. We'd send her with a thermos with steak in it, or hard-boiled eggs, or cheese, and a thermos with milk. So she was really able to do it at school the same way she is at home. We prefer to homeschool because with the ileostomy, she would have had to have a nurse at school, and she did. And we just I felt like I wanted to have her home with me so I could take care of her rather than dealing with the whole nursing situation, because it's intrusive to have someone else that you have to rely on and all of those things. And she had to be in school being the kid that had the nurse. So we opted to homeschool, and we have a great homeschool community here. So it's been wonderful for her. And everyone is very much like understanding that she eats differently. So we don't do a lot of food activities, to be honest with you. But like I said, it's been great for our whole family because we're all so much healthier because of it. And I have autoimmune issues myself, and I've been able to really keep it at bay with carnivore.
As far as, because she's 5, how much insight does she have into her own condition and understanding the rationale for being on the diet that might be different from other kids?
She's very interested in anatomy. I could tell you that. She really does understand that her body works differently and she can't have the same foods other kids can have. And she's very careful. Even if she sees something around the house, and like a salad, for example, she'll be like, "Can I have a bite of that?" Always, before she drinks or eats anything new, she'll ask me, "Is this okay? Is this safe for me?" Because she knows, she has memories of being in the hospital and she does not want to go back. And particularly the volvulus that happened was really traumatic for her. And we did a lot of talking about that. So she understands that was a result of eating the wrong food, and that it obviously wasn't her fault, but we can't let that happen again.
Yeah, gosh, but you said, like, I think you said 14 surgeries. That's going to leave a lasting impression for sure. Outside, obviously she's got the little ileostomy, and obviously that's how she has to take care of her waist and stuff like that. But is she able to run and play and jump and do all the other normal kid stuff pretty much?
Yeah, you would never know. You would never know that she has this condition. She does every single thing other kids do. And now that she has no central line, she can go swimming. So the past 2 years, we've been on the boat in the summertime, and she's jumping in the water and playing with the other kids, and we take her tubing. She does all of the normal summer activities now, which has been such a blessing. Because the first few years it was really tough taking a kid on the boat with a central line and worrying about, God forbid, water splashed on her or something. So the stress level has come down so much for all of us.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty amazing. So, you said it was primarily affects gut mobility and also the bladder. What's going on with her bladder? Is her bladder normalized now, or what was it? Did changing the diet impact her bladder activity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it did. So she used to have complete and total retention of urine. She could not pee a drop at all. We never had a wet diaper from her. So we had to calf like 4 to 6 times a day. So now she, probably a year into the diet, she started saying, I have to go potty, and running to the bathroom. And she would pee, and we were shocked. So yeah, now she goes to the bathroom completely on her own all day. And I do cath her at night just to make sure there's no residual, because we know that her bladder is weaker, but she never has a problem voiding now.
Wow. Now, again, it's just like, and I don't know, again, I don't know enough about this condition to know what the normal course, you probably do.
Yeah.
Do we have a normal sort of, is there a normal life expectancy for these kiddos? Do you know what the condition usually ends up with?
It's usually a couple years if
that they live.
Yeah, if they're lucky. Yeah,
Gosh.
it's very young. I know quite a few kids who haven't made it to 5, unfortunately. So we're very lucky that she's here and that she's doing so well. But looking at her and how healthy she is, I think if we can really keep her on the diet, keep her understanding what works for her body, and not have any exposure to other types of foods, I don't see a limit for her life expectancy, which is really crazy considering all these other kids who have lost their lives to MMIHS.
So, and again, it's MIHS. Is that what that, is that what, and that stands for, do you know what that stands for?
You put me on the spot. I don't think I can say the whole thing.
Okay.
It's like megacystic microcolon intestinal hypoperistalsis syndrome.
There you go. MMIHS.
Did I do it right?
Megacystis microcolon intestinal hyperperistalsis syndrome. Yeah, wow, interesting. Yeah, that's a new one for me. I've never heard that. Of course, that's certainly not anything as an orthopedic surgeon I would have run into. My goodness, but yeah. That's really truly amazing. So let me just, I know this is such an incredible thing with the daughter, but let me just, you said you had an autoimmune issue. Do you mind sharing what's going on with that?
Yeah, after I gave birth to her, we realized that I was having like rashes all over my body and just tons of chronic fatigue and all these really strange issues. So we went to a natural doctor. He did a bunch of blood work and found that I had autoimmunity in like 5 of my bodily tissues. So like heart, brain, or like nervous system, 2 in my gut, and lungs. I had all of these autoimmune problems. And I started eating a more natural diet. So I cut out carbs completely. I guess I was doing more like paleo. But I wasn't eating a lot of fat. So I was exhausted all the time because I had no carbs and I had no fat. So I did improve a lot, but I lost a little bit too much weight. So once we ended up doing more keto and adding in a lot of fats, I did better. And then when I cut everything out and did carnivore, that was the healthiest that I was. Now, I was still doing some dairy, but I was doing fermented dairy. So I was really doing her diet with the no plant gaps. And the difference was like through my pregnancy and breastfeeding journeys, really. So I have my daughter, who's the oldest, she's 5. I have a 3-year-old and I have a 9-month-old. So
Wow.
my 3-year-old, yeah, my hands are full. My 3-year-old was born at 29 weeks. And that was when I had already gone more natural with the diet. But I was so magnesium deficient that I just spontaneously went into labor and had him. And then with my 9-month-old, I made it completely to term on carnivore. And then I have been breastfeeding him carnivore. And he's my biggest baby so far.
Well, born at 29 weeks, of course, going to be smaller. And then, of course, your other one had the MMIHS. Is that because that is a rare genetic condition? Was there any concern about the other kiddos being potentially affected by that? Was that something you had to be screened for? Or was there any thoughts around that?
Yeah, we had to. So originally, they had thought that we must be carriers to have it, but we both got tested and it was a de novo mutation, completely new. And so we weren't really concerned. By the time we got pregnant with the second one, we already knew that we were safe. Thank God.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just looking at it. It says a lot of the kiddos don't even make it to 1 year. Occasionally someone will make it to adulthood. So it sounds like she's certainly beating the odds. And gosh, given that she's basically a thriving, normal kid, and you said no one has ever been rehooked up. Kid has had an ileostomy. No one's ever gotten rehooked up with this disease. So is that something the I guess the pediatric GI surgeon is actually considering at this point? Is that something you guys are in active discussion? And if so, when might that occur?
We've talked about it. We've had a lot of discussions, my husband and I, and the doctors. We're not quite ready to take that step because of the scar tissue from all the surgeries. She's got really big nodules. I actually didn't realize that she still has so many. And the other day I was changing her ostomy pouch. I pressed on her stomach and I found a new one. So there's like 3 that are about the size of a golf ball each, and her stomach's not very big, So we're concerned that there could be blockages. So we're addressing that. There's an enzyme that eats scar tissue called serrapeptase. So we've been giving her that enzyme to try to break down some of that scar tissue in the meantime. And also, my husband and I just really want her to be involved in the process. Mm-hmm. She's very afraid of the hospital. She's very afraid of doctors, and she has a lot of trauma. Like when we went to get her central line taken out sometime early last year, early 2023, we were bringing her into the OR. I had explained to her, you're going to go to sleep. You're going to wake up. Your line's going to be gone. You're going to have a little stitch. No big deal. She was happy as could be until I was carrying her into the OR and she saw the oxygen mask. And they put her to sleep with an oxygen mask once with the anesthesia, and she freaked out. I had to literally hold her like this, and they gave her the anesthesia in my arms because we could not get her to calm down. So they put it right in her central line and put her to sleep. So we definitely want her to be involved and understand the risks of the surgery. So we probably won't even think about it till she's much older.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, and certainly when you go into a belly that's been operated on multiple occasions, there is a ton of scar tissue, and that can make the surgery very challenging, of course. But one of the things I will say, just anecdotally, that I've noticed is people that have reported on Carnivore that a lot of times some of their scar tissue resolves. I've seen people with keloid type things or hyperplastic scar tissue that is actually resolved. So there may be maybe the diet itself plus the peptide or the enzyme you're giving her, the combination might reduce that to where she has a little bit more motility in the gut to where she can be a better candidate for that. That would be really an amazing thing. So I guess she's 5. Does she have any sort of like concern, or do you guys have you seen any like negative since you started this diet? Has it all been upside and no downside?
It's all been upside, to be completely honest with you. The only hard part, the challenging part, was to try to get her off of TPN because she was basically almost type 2 diabetic. We were starting to have the discussions with endocrine about like needing insulin and things like that because there's so much sugar in the TPN, and her pancreas was just shot. So and that's why, side note, a lot of these kids end up needing 5 organs when they do get a transplant because they need the pancreas, liver, and kidneys from the damage from the TPN. So getting her off of the TPN and onto carbohydrates that she could tolerate was hard. So the only carbohydrates she can tolerate are their fermented dairy. So she can have fermented at first. Now she can do raw dairy, but she had to have the fermented dairy, and that regulated her blood sugar and like stabled her out. But for a while, her blood sugar was bottoming out when we tried to stop.
How is her appetite these days?
It's great. She eats a lot of meat, let me tell you. Her favorite thing is bacon wrapped liver. So I make her a lot of that. I make chicken nuggets for them. So I take like ground turkey, coat it in pork panko, and deep fry in lard. She loves those. Loves a steak, loves a burger. Typical carnivore foods.
Gotcha. Well, I guess it'd be turkey nuggets, I guess officially, but
Yeah, turkey nuggets.
turkey nuggets. Is she consuming, because a lot of the concerns around with kids is just getting enough energy because their job is to grow their brain, grow their body. And there's a lot of, you need high energy foods to do that. That's why a lot of people feed their kids these sugary, refined carbs that provide that energy need. But I mean, she's getting it through protein and fat, and probably a lot of fat. Does she consume a lot of fat?
Yeah, so we still do G-tube feeds for her. She does still have a G-tube. I only do 2 a day, but I put tons of butter and lard in her G-tube feeds. And I also do MCT oil and like liver, egg yolks. So she gets tons of fat through her G-tube. And because she gets so much in her G-tube, she doesn't really have a huge appetite for it, but she will sit down and munch on a stick of butter.
How long do you think the G tube will be a necessity for? Is that something that potentially could be discontinued?
I definitely think so. The only reason we kept it is because with the ileostomy, she can lose electrolytes very quickly if she gets like a stomach bug or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we can give her the broth, bone broth, actually was our replacement of electrolytes from TPN. Now, normally they tried to move us onto Pedialyte, and I was like, I'm not giving her that. I know she can't tolerate it. So we moved her onto bone broth, and that has met all of her electrolyte needs. And she doesn't love to drink it, and she won't drink enough of it to not use the G-tube. So I think by the time she gets a little older and she is more willing to drink the bone broth to keep herself really well hydrated, we could definitely get rid of the G-tube.
Yeah, that's the thing, that one of the things with the colon, one of the jobs of the colon is to reabsorb electrolytes. And because her colon is effectively not part of the loop anymore, she's losing a lot more electrolytes through that ileostomy. And so you have to keep on top of those electrolytes and fluids, as you probably are well aware. Yeah, gosh, tricky situation, but sounds like she's just doing as good as you can imagine with this particular condition. So how do your other kiddos interact with her? Obviously, your 9-month-old is probably too little to do much of anything, but the 3-year-old's probably is there any kind of weird interaction with the kiddos?
No, they roughhouse, and they're definitely fight like normal siblings. They love to play together and they have a great time. We have a playground in the backyard, and they climb and go on the swings, and they're outside constantly when it's not too cold out here in PA. And the 9-month-old too, he's crawling around, climbing on things, and they all really do play nicely together. There was one time that they were roughhousing, and my 3-year-old accidentally got a hold of her ostomy pouch and pulled it off. So that wasn't fun for any of us. But these things happen, and my husband and I just really try to stay grounded and stay grateful that we're home, because living at the hospital is not fun for anyone. And my now 3-year-old was living at the hospital with us when he was first born while she was going through all of these surgeries. So being home as a family under one roof is such a blessing.
Yeah, so your 3-year-old, born a little bit premature, 29 weeks. You obviously had your first daughter who was going through all this stuff. And then it sounds like maybe shortly after your 3-year-old was born, you guys started transitioning more to this animal-based thing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So he started out obviously small because he was preemie. And how's he doing as far as growth and all that stuff?
He's more than average now. He's in like the 75th percentile, as if he was born on time. So he's a good size. I'm not going to say he's huge. He's in the 75th percentile. He's growing great developmentally, very smart kid, meeting all his milestones, talking like crazy, tons of energy.
Wow, that's awesome. And he's eating, you said, mostly an animal-based diet, maybe a little bit of fruit here and there, but generally just kicking butt as far as a kid can go, as far as a 3-year-old can go.
Yeah.
And so your oldest, your 5-year-old, does she have any? How's she doing, like school wise, cognitively? I mean, obviously she's only 5, she's not doing calculus yet, but I mean, she seemed like she's doing everything milestone wise and developmentally, mentally, and all that stuff
Yeah.
going well.
Yeah, she is reading already. She can read short books, and we have a great homeschool curriculum that teaches them to read at a pretty early age. So she flies through everything. Cognitively, she's very impressive. She's very focused. All of my kids, very focused, everyone's always impressed when they see them sit down and they'll do a puzzle for 45 minutes and not do anything else. So I know that going on an animal-based diet as a family, and especially for children, I think is something that's so controversial. And if parents do it, they're afraid to speak about it because they're afraid of the consequences of someone else finding out that they're feeding their kid mostly meat. But in our situation where it saved her life, we can talk about it a little bit more freely. And yeah, I think cognitively she is, and behaviorally too. All of my kids are very good, polite, they listen. We don't have any crazy behavioral issues like you have on the standard American diet. And I that all over the place right now is kids who are really struggling behaviorally and cognitively, either on the spectrum or similar.
Yeah, that's one thing that's of interest to me is you see these kiddos, and some of them are just behaviorally they're having struggling, and they're upset very easily. They're crying, they're screaming all the time. The parents don't know what to do. Here, let me. I remember I was sitting in the airport not long ago, and there was a little, it must have been about a 2, maybe a 3-year-old girl, was just freaking out, and her mom was like, just relax. We'll get you that chocolate candy as soon as we can. It was just like they're going to placate him with this candy. And I was just like, maybe that's part of the problem. Feed these kids, right? So how, again, I want to, because you've got a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, a 9-month-old, they're all eating mostly animal based, and your daughter's pretty much strictly carnivore. How do they do behaviorally? Are you having a lot of these temper tantrums? Is that pretty rare, or is that something you see very much?
It's very rare. So like, when Riley was little, she used to have a lot of temper tantrums. When she was on the TPN, she would have these massive meltdowns that would last for an hour. And I would talk to her occupational therapist, and she was like, this is not normal for a 2-year-old. She shouldn't have a tantrum that lasts an hour. She would have tantrums so bad that her ostomy would prolapse and she would need surgery.
Wow.
That's how bad they were. And we've never had that issue with either of my sons. Normal 2-year-old stuff, and 3-year-old stuff, but very, very easygoing kids, I would say. Very flexible. They go with the flow. Yeah, nothing ever behaviorally with my other kids. And all of that stuff that she struggled with when she was on the TPN cleared right up once she went on carnivore.
Wow. Well, your youngest is 9 months old, so I don't know if you breastfeed, and then maybe most people by about somewhere around 6 months they start adding food in. Is that what's going on with the littlest?
Yeah, he is 9 months old and he's 24 and a half pounds. And my daughter at almost 3 was 26 pounds.
Yeah, so he's definitely packing on the weight.
He's enormous.
So you're carnivore mom, breastfeeding carnivore food, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's eating now. Is he eating his first foods as well now? Is he starting to eat a little bit of food?
Yeah, he eats not a ton. I'll be honest with you. He really mostly breastfeeds. He prefers it, and it's fine. So, but he loves bacon. That's something he'll eat all day long. Just hand him strip of bacon after strip of bacon, and steak. I just will cook a ribeye and cut it into strips and give it to him, and he'll chew on it and suck on it. That's what we do.
I'm sure it's fun to watch him do that. What about, let me ask you, how has he done with a lot of babies get real rashy, a lot of them are real colicky. Is that an issue for him at all, or no?
So my 9-month-old, he does have eczema, and I was really confused because I'm like, I did everything right. How did it go wrong? I have pinpointed it to right after I gave birth. I had to take a lot of Advil. I had a lot of pain, and I'm not someone who takes pharmaceuticals. And I think that it did a number on his gut, unfortunately. So he does have eczema. We cover him in beef tallow constantly. And that really helps with the inflammation and keeping his skin nice. So I know that he will heal from that eventually, the carnivore diet that he's on. But for now, we just keep up with the tallow.
So that's interesting. I can't remember what it was, like baby butt butter or something. I remember we were putting diaper cream on when my kids when they were little. I don't know if that could be, I guess you could do tallow with that, I suppose. I don't know, for diaper cream, or if you even.
I use it for diaper cream, yeah.
Interesting. So do you have any pets, like the dog come up and lick him or something?
No, we don't have any pets, so there's no one's sniffing him for a snack.
Yeah, I was going to say that might be a downside if the dog wants to gnaw on the kid because he tastes like tallow or something like that.
Yeah, we have had that problem with my daughter because her G-tube, like right after a G-tube feed, I took her to the chiropractor and they have a husky in there. And the husky was like trying to nibble on her G-tube.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh no, he smells the liver that's in there.
Goodness. Yeah, that would be a downside to that. So well, let me ask you, obviously you're talking to me, so you're obviously sharing this story. Have you been sharing this throughout like social media? Do you have like a little social media presence of any type?
Yeah, I'm not huge on social media. I do share her story a little bit. I was interviewed by Children's Health Defense and I talked to Dr. Chafee about it too. So I'm just starting to share her story. I wrote a book about her story earlier this year and published it just to really give the other MMIHS families more information and let people know that even in the most severe cases, the no plant gaps diet, the carnivore diet, these diets are so healing and so nourishing to kids that really are in dire situations. So, but yeah, I'm on YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook. I think that's it.
What was the name of the book?
The book is called Dying to Thriving, and it's what was it? I don't even know the subtitle. How simple dietary changes reverse my daughter's terminal genetic disease. It's a mouthful. Wow. But if
what's her name? Can you share her name, your daughter? Is that okay or no?
Yeah, Riley. I changed her name in the book. Just
okay.
But her name is
Okay, wonderful. Wow, that's got to be. Yes, it's almost like a miracle, isn't it? It really is. You think about where she was at 2 years of age versus where she is at 5. Had you ever, obviously you said you're a person of faith. Was this something that you just let it out there and hoping for the best? Obviously you had to be prepared for the worst, but obviously this sounds like the best of possible scenarios out of this situation.
Yeah, my husband is a very positive person and he's a very godly man. And he was like, she's going to beat this. And the doctors were like, okay, whatever. Like they really were like, you need to prepare for the worst. She's going to be TPN dependent until she needs a transplant. And then she's going to get a transplant if there's one available, or that's going to be it. They were very much doom and gloom with us from the start. So we had no hope with the medical establishment. We knew that. They had no hope for her. And I was not really a Christian, like a Bible reading Christian when I met my husband. But after she was born, I had so many people in my life say, you need to pray about this. You need to ask God to help you carry this cross. And so I started praying. I started reading the Bible and I just surrendered and said, God, if you show me how to heal my daughter, I promise I will share the story with others. And then earlier this year, I was watching a sermon about making vows to God and the importance of keeping those vows. And I felt very convicted. And that's when I wrote the book. Because I was like, God really did save her and heal her. Our life is like, it's like a normal life now. We really do have a normal life. We change an ostomy pouch every once in a while, but it's not a big deal. And a lot of our time revolves around like making her G-tube feeds and cooking everything from scratch. But that's it.
Let me just, because we have a little bit of time left here, let me ask you about the ostomy, because this is for people to understand. Basically, food goes in the stomach, goes through the intestines, and it comes out in this little bag, which is her waste, doesn't go to the colon. So today, feeding her this basically carnivore diet, how does that compare to her ostomy situation when she was eating more of a mixed diet with lean meats and fruits and vegetables and that type of stuff? How is it different?
So there's no more prolapsing. So that's a relief because the amount of stress and pain involved in that is insane.
So when the prolapse occurs, the intestine actually comes out, it pulls out through the skin, and it's like you got your intestines hanging outside of you, which is obviously got to be traumatic, right?
Yeah, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So fiber is what was causing the ostomy prolapses. And people, and even the doctors were like, she needs fiber to push everything through. It was the absolute wrong advice. It was fermenting, and also her intestines were so weak. She would try to push that fiber out, and boom, a prolapse would happen. So there's no more prolapsing. Her motility is like perfect. She never has any distension whatsoever. There's no more pseudo obstructions. There's no more gas. And it's funny, like, I think it was, I don't know what her name is, Steak and Butter Gal on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bella, yeah.
She talked about how you don't have a lot of gas on carnivore. It's true. I can see it with my daughter because the difference between before, huge distended belly all the time. Like you could bounce a coin on it that hard and distended. You could see her intestines through her abdominal wall. And now nothing, completely flat. There's no gas. There's no gas in the ostomy bag. It's just smooth sailing for her.
Yeah, this is, like I said, I've been promoting this carnivore diet now for many years. I've seen all kinds of basically miracles. Almost, it seems like miracles, right? And obviously this is one that it doesn't affect a lot of kids, but it could dramatically alter the course of, I think, a lot of these kiddos' lives, hopefully. And I imagine that the physicians that are experts in this condition is a very small number. And maybe the guy you go to or the guy you go to will maybe get this information out there. Wouldn't it be cool if you could, you could impact all those kids that are suffering from this or yet to be born with this condition, that, it doesn't have to be a death sentence in a way that it is for so many of these little kids that die at a very young age. And, you talk about intestinal transplant. We're like, wow, it's amazing we can do that. But I mean, what if you could avoid it? What if you didn't need that? And the reason for the transplant is because the gut just finally just fails. It just stops working completely, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah. Well, yes. And also when they don't try to do transplants, like it's not something that they want to do with the bowel transplants because it's really hard to find a match because they have to really be a perfect genetic match. It's not like a liver or kidney. You could get it, you can squeeze by with not having everything so perfect, but the bowel, it has to be so exact. That's one. Two, really hard to find organs that are going to fit in a child that are intact. Yeah. So like between those two things, really rare to actually get a transplant recipient. And then the real reason why they end up doing the transplants is because these kids run out of ports. So they have the central line. Usually they start off like with a PICC line. That's how my daughter started. She had a PICC line in her arm, and then it was the other arm, and then it was the chest.
This is all for TPN, essentially, correct? Yeah,
all for TPN. So they ended up having to replace the line. Then she ended up with a CVC in her chest. But a lot of these kids, because their bowel is so overgrown with fungus, they have no ability to fight infections, and they end up with fungal infections in the line. That line has to be pulled. And most of the time, the scarring in that area is going to prevent another line from going in that spot. So they just lost a port. I know kids that have them on their backs, like their lines, because they just have run out of ports. So that's really when the situation gets dire and they say, okay, we're going to do an intestinal transplant. And it's because they're out of ports. I know one girl, she's 19. So she's made it really, really far. She had leukemia when she was younger on top of MMIHS. And then she ended up with a transplant because her liver failed from the TPN. And she was literally dying from liver failure and like bleeding out when they called her and she got the intestinal transplant. But again, like the bowel transplant doesn't fix everything because now you have to be on immunosuppressants for life. And I know another girl who had a bowel transplant and ended up with a rare blood cancer that can't be treated. And she's only 14 years old, so I don't know how much longer she's going to live because of the cancer from the bowel transplant. There's just so many complications.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. The 19-year-old, you said of her, have you talked to her and said, hey, diet might be an option for her? I don't know if that's something that you're willing to do or comfortable doing.
I've reached out. She's like actually big on social media. I have reached out to her, but I haven't heard back. But maybe I'll send her this podcast and she'll talk to me.
Yeah. Interesting. Goodness. Well, gosh, what a powerful testimony. Obviously, I know, is Riley running around somewhere right now? I don't know if she's hiding out.
Oh, she's home with Dad. I'm at the office.
Gotcha. Okay. And on your social media, you have little pictures of her and stuff like that where people could see how she's doing.
I try to protect her face, but I have pictures of her like in the book, but you can't see her face. But she's very healthy and beautiful and long curly blonde hair and blue eyes, and she's a little fashionista, so she loves to get dressed up every day. She's in a ball gown, no joke, and loves to have her hair done and loves to do art. So very much a girly girl and just a normal kid now. Thank God.
Oh, good for you guys. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been wonderful. So remind me any social media handles you might have.
Oh, so my website is Christian Health Collective. So it's chealthcollective.org. And that has all my social media handles on it and all my information if anyone's looking to reach me.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I know it's about lunchtime where you're at over there and on the East Coast. So thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.